Hi everyone. So in today's reporter story, I'm going to talk about what we need for shooting stories, especially as students when you're just learning what elements we're going to have to figure out what's available to us to be able to shoot a story and how things can change on stories and a little bit about safety. So when you're picking stories to cover, obviously the first thing you need to think about is it in the area where I live? Do I have access to it? You can do something that is generating from somewhere farther away if there's a local angle. So for instance, if there's a hurricane going on in the East Coast, maybe there are groups of people from the Red Cross or different churches who are in the Bay Area getting together and going to take a trip to go help the people affected by the hurricane on the East Coast. So that way you could talk to some of those people, get video of them packing up, and get a little local story, local angle on something that's going on somewhere else. So that could work, but you do want to think about, what do I have access to shoot and who can I interview? And this is true in the professional world as well. If there is a great soccer player who is breaking records on some local team, and the soccer player agrees to do an interview with me, but then she says, I'm not comfortable with you getting video of me playing soccer. Well, that's not really going to work. It's not going to be compelling for the person watching it. And, you can get creative, maybe show pictures of them playing soccer. Maybe they got injured. Okay, so we'll use some file video and some pictures. That could work. But ideally, we need the person playing soccer. We also need to think about, and I have students do this all the time when they're first starting out, they shoot, maybe you get on the soccer field, you shoot this beautiful video of the person playing soccer, and then your interview is them like laying in their bed or sitting on like a bed with just crap all over the place. Don't do that. That's ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense. You want them as close to the action that you shot in their interview. Think about how beautiful that's going to be, of maybe the rest of the team playing soccer and then your interview subject maybe kind of sitting on the field or sitting on the bleachers or whatever with that action behind them. That's appropriate. That makes sense. We've got the soccer behind them. It wouldn't make sense for them to be in their bed unless they're injured and they're laid up and have a cast. You can make that argument. But oftentimes I have students sort of separate out the interview and maybe do it later, and it's not as beautiful in the story because you lose that cohesiveness. So you want to think about that as well. Safety-wise, you might want to cover something at night. Maybe you're really into like crime and investigative stuff. Cool. But you also need to think about safety. So if you're schlepping all this gear to some crime scene at night by yourself as a student, that's not safe. So you either need to bring a buddy with you or shoot the story in the daytime. I think that might be a little more safe, but really think about that. Don't ever put yourself into a situation where you're going to be in danger. So that's really important. If you're shooting a stand-up of yourself, which many times you will be doing that by yourself, you set the camera up, you step back, you shoot your stand-up. Always make sure you check the stand-up before you leave and the audio so that you make sure it's exactly the way you want it, so you don't go home and realize, oh no, I messed my words up or the audio didn't work. But you also have to be thinking about, especially in a public place, is the camera far enough away from you that someone could easily quickly go by and grab the camera and run with it? That has happened to some of my students. So be super careful with that as well. That's another instance where it might be nice to bring a buddy or one of your friends to just be there with the camera to keep that from happening. So thinking about safety, thinking about what can I realistically shoot, what B-roll is available to me, and what interviews are available to me. You need both to really make that story sing. So think about that when you're planning stories out. Let's see, things can change. So in the professional world, sometimes it can be exciting, but a lot of times it's a big disappointment. You might be shooting a beautiful story and you're almost done with it. You're going to go edit it, something that you maybe feel really passionate about, and breaking news happens. And then the station that you work for calls and says, you got to go cover this fire. And oftentimes that first story just gets scrapped. It doesn't get finished. The next day, maybe it's considered to be kind of old, and then it never airs. So that was one of the worst parts of the job, because the people that I did that first story with might have been really excited for it to air, and maybe it was something that I felt passionate about, and then it doesn't air. So the choice is there is that on my own time, I could finish editing it at least and give it to the people that I worked with and interviewed for that story. That is an option. But if it is something that is topical, meaning like it was happening that day, it really might not air the next day, and it's just kind of part of the job. So that's something that I didn't really like. So those are the main things that I wanted to talk about today. Just setting up, making sure it's a thorough setup, it's a realistic setup of a story, picking stories that are happening close to you, that are safe, and even thinking about as a student what's going on campus. Make it easy for yourself. Don't make it so hard that it's like giving you a lot of stress in those beginning stages. Pick stories that are going on close to you. Pick street fairs, parades, things where there are a lot of people and you have a lot of choices of video and sound, and you can really play and use that as your playground, rather than when a student says, I want to do a story about the library. I mean, you can if there's like some big library event, but the library is, first of all, what's the story? Library. Is it something special about this library? We'd have to figure that out. Like, what is the story? But also, it's so quiet at the library. What nat sound are you going to have? What video are you going to have except a bunch of boring books? Maybe somebody taking the book off the shelf. It's not impossible to do the library story, but in the beginning, pick stories with action and activity so that you can relax a little bit and have more fun with it. So that's what I've got, and I'll see you next time.